The marble floor of CA Grimini is cold beneath my feet, cold as the stairs of every banker, every notary, every silk-suited gentleman who has just watched the doors of Venice's most powerful lending house close in my face. I am Lady Arabella di Monteluce. I have restructured the failing estates of 3 noble houses. I have untangled inheritance disputes that broke lesser minds. I have sat in rooms full of powerful men and made them feel, quietly, the particular shame of being wrong. And today, on a Tuesday morning in October, with the Grand Canal glittering indifferently outside, I am being told my credentials are under review. Someone has whispered lies into powerful ears. Someone has taken 5 years of my work and reframed it as recklessness. And I know, with the cold clarity that has always been my only weapon, exactly when it began. It began the morning Duca Cesare di Ravello walked into my study. I should have sent him away. I should have remembered that the most dangerous men rarely arrive looking dangerous. He arrived looking like a problem I could solve. I was wrong. This story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real locations is purely coincidental. Now, before we go further, drop your location in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? And if you believe that a woman's sharpest weapon has always been her mind, subscribe. This channel is built on persistence. Every story we tell here is proof that persistence outlasts power. Here is today's question. Think about it as we go. If someone risked their entire reputation to protect yours, would you trust them? Or would you call it control dressed as devotion? Let us go back to where it all began. Venice, Italy. October 1858. Lady Arabella di Monteluce did not receive clients in the grand parlor. She received them in her study, a deliberately unromantic room on the 2nd floor of her Dorsoguro townhouse, overlooking a narrow canal where gondoliers argued cheerfully every morning, and the light came in flat and honest, without flattery. The room said plainly, "This is a place of work." If that disappointed you, the door was behind you. Duca Cesare di Ravello was not disappointed. He stood in the doorway for precisely 3 seconds, long enough to take in the ledgers stacked along the walls, the 2 writing desks, the complete absence of decorative furniture. And then he walked in and sat down without being invited. Arabella noted this, filed it, said nothing. "You come recommended," she said instead, not looking up from the estate report open before her, "by 3 people whose judgment I respect and 1 person whose judgment I do not. I will let you determine which category carries more weight." Cesare di Ravello, black-haired, broad-shouldered, with the particular stillness of a man who had learned early that rooms waited for him, looked at her with an expression she could not immediately classify. "And which category am I in?" he asked. "You are not yet in any category," Arabella replied. "You are a problem that has not yet shown me its shape." He almost smiled. She almost found that interesting. She opened his estate ledgers instead. What she found inside them made her set down her pen. The Di Ravello holdings, stretching from the Veneto plains to the Adriatic coastline, were hemorrhaging capital through 3 successive inheritance miscalculations. His late father had structured the estate under the Codice Civil Albertino, the civil code governing noble property across the pre-unification Italian states. But a boundary dispute filed in 1849 had quietly invalidated one of the foundational land clauses, and not one of Cesari's 4 solicitors had noticed. Under the civil codes governing the Lombardo-Veneto kingdom in 1858, noble estates were bound by extraordinarily rigid inheritance structures. Women held virtually no independent legal claim to property. Their assets passed first to fathers, then husbands, then male heirs. A woman like Arabella, operating as an independent financial advisor, existed in a legal gray space the codes had never anticipated and therefore never explicitly prohibited. She was, in the eyes of the law, an anomaly. She had decided to be an indispensable one. "Your solicitors," Arabella said carefully, "have been billing you for work they did not complete." Cesari's expression did not change. How long have you known? Approximately 4 minutes. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, and this was the thing she would return to later in the small hours of sleepless nights, he did not reach for his pride. He did not reframe her discovery as his own instinct. He did not perform the wounded dignity of a duca being corrected by a woman in a dorsoguro study. He said simply, "Then I am 4 minutes less ruined than I was when I walked in. Tell me the rest." Notice how a man who accepts correction gracefully in the first meeting is not automatically trustworthy. Watch whether that grace holds when the stakes rise. Humility that costs nothing is easy. The test comes later. Arabella told him the rest. He listened without interrupting once. And when she finished, he asked 3 questions. Precise, intelligent questions that told her he had understood not just the conclusions, but the methodology behind them. She did not let him see that this unsettled her. She was, however, considerably less certain he would be gone by the end of the week. He was not gone by the end of the week. He was back on Thursday, and the Thursday after that. It was during the 3rd Thursday session that Count Aldrich Falco arrived, unannounced, as men of significant social standing often do, operating on the assumption that their arrival is always welcome and their timing always convenient. Count Falco was the most visibly progressive nobleman in the Veneto. He quoted reformist philosophers at dinner parties. He had publicly supported the expansion of commercial rights for unmarried women of property, a position so radical in 1858 Venice that it had made him enormously fashionable in certain salons and quietly despised in others. He was also, Arabella had noticed, very skilled at supporting women in rooms where it cost him nothing. Lady Arabella. He kissed her hand with practiced warmth. I have been telling everyone at the Palazzo Barbarigo that you are the sharpest financial mind operating in Venice today. I hope you know how widely that is now understood. I was not aware my competence required your endorsement to be understood, Arabella replied pleasantly. Falco laughed, the easy laugh of a man who found women's directness charming in small doses. Of course not. I merely like to ensure credit lands where it belongs. Across the room, Cesare di Ravello said nothing. He had been reviewing the corrected land clause documents when Falco arrived. He had not stood. He had not performed the elaborate social choreography the situation seemed to invite. He simply watched, with that particular unreadable stillness. As Falco arranged himself in the chair closest to Arabella, and began describing a financial discussion he was hosting at his Cannaregio palazzo the following week. I would be honored, Falco said warmly, if Lady Arabella would present her restructuring methodology to the group. It would carry enormous weight coming directly from her. Arabella considered this. Who comprises the group? 6 senior members of the Venetian merchant banking circle. Men whose opinions shape lending policy across the region. It was, objectively, an extraordinary professional opportunity. It was also, she noticed, framed entirely as Falco's gift to her. In 1858 Venice, the private Palazzo Salon functioned as the true seat of financial and political power, more binding than any courtroom. Decisions about lending, inheritance disputes, and commercial licensing were made over candlelit suppers, not in legal chambers. For a woman to enter that world, she required a male sponsor. The question was always, what did the sponsor require in return? I will consider it, Arabella said. Falco smiled warmly. Cesare turned a page. Later, after Falco had gone and the study had settled back into its working quiet, Cesare spoke without looking up from the documents. He will introduce you as his discovery, he said. Not as yourself. Arabella's pen did not stop moving. Most men do. I know. A pause. I am noting it, not managing it. She looked up then, found him already looking at her. Not with possession, not with the territorial flicker she had half expected. With something quieter. Something that looked almost like careful, reluctant honesty. She looked back down at her ledgers. But the words stayed with her longer than she intended. Notice how Count Falco's behavior carries a pattern worth naming. Public praise paired with private positioning. He amplifies her reputation, but always through his platform, his invitation, his introduction. Generosity that consistently routes through the giver's hands is not generosity. It is architecture. The whisper began, as Venetian whispers always do, on the water. Someone, no name attached, no signature, no traceable origin, had suggested to 3 members of the merchant banking circle that Lady Arabella di Monteluce's restructuring of the Fortini estate accounts had precipitated the collapse of a Paduan bond issue the previous spring. It was a precise, credible-sounding lie. The kind that travels fast precisely because it arrives already dressed in the language of concern. Such a shame. Such a promising mind. But perhaps the complexities of large-scale estate law require more than unconventional methods. By the first Monday of November, 2 clients had sent letters of regret. By Wednesday, a third. By Thursday morning, Arabella had reconstructed the entire timeline of the Paduan bond collapse from her own archived records. Every date, every transaction, every signature, and confirmed what she already knew. The collapse had occurred 4 months before she was engaged by the Fortini family. The chronology was irrefutable. The truth, however, requires an audience. She sent a formal request for a hearing to the Venetian Banking Consortium. She was offered an appointment 3 weeks hence. She sent a second request, marked urgent. She received a polite acknowledgement. She did not go to Cesare. This was important to her, the not going. She had spent 5 years building something that belonged entirely to herself, in a city and a century that offered women exactly no legal scaffolding on which to build it. The civil codes did not recognize her contracts. The banking consortium did not formally recognize her credentials. What she had was reputation, painstakingly, relentlessly constructed, and she would defend it the same way she had built it, alone, with documentation, with precision. What she did not know, could not have known, was that 3 floors above the C.A. Grimani banking hall, in a private reading room she had never entered, Duca Cesare di Ravello was doing something that had no precedent in his 34 years of aristocratic existence. He was studying, not his own estate documents, not the land clause corrections she had prepared for him. He was working through her methodology, her specific, documented, step-by-step analytical framework, with the focused, unhurried attention of a man preparing for something. His secretary, who had served the Di Ravello household for 11 years, would later say he had never seen the Duca request the same documents 3 times in a single evening before. In pre-unification Italy, a woman's professional reputation functioned as her only legally unassailable asset, because it was the one thing no civil code had yet found a mechanism to formally strip from her. Property could be entailed away. Contracts could be challenged. But competence, once publicly established, was harder to legislate out of existence. This is precisely why destroying it through social whisper, rather than legal challenge, was the weapon of choice against women who operated outside sanctioned roles. Notice how the smear campaign targeting Arabella carries a specific signature. It attacks her methodology, not her character. This is deliberate. Questioning a woman's professional judgment in 1858 required no proof, only doubt. And doubt, once planted in the right ears, grows without tending. She did not know he was coming. She was still alone in her Dorsoduro study, rebuilding her case document by document, when the canals outside went dark and the city of Venice folded itself quietly into night. She did not know that by morning, everything would be different. C.A. Grimani. Venice. Friday morning, November 7th, 1858. The banking hall opened at 9. Cesare di Ravello arrived at 8:45. He did not arrive as a duca. He did not send his crest ahead, did not deploy the elaborate machinery of aristocratic arrival. The liveried footmen, the formal announcement, the careful choreography of rank asserting itself into a room. He arrived in a dark wool coat, carrying a leather document case, looking precisely like a man who had somewhere specific to be and something specific to prove. The senior clerk recognized him immediately and moved to usher him toward the private reception rooms reserved for nobility. Cesare declined. "I require the main chamber," he said. "And I require Director Morosini." "Now, if you please." Director Morosini was a careful man. Careful men in positions of institutional power develop, over many years, a finely calibrated sensitivity to the precise weight of trouble walking through their doors. He took one look at the document case under Cesari's arm and felt that sensitivity fire with considerable urgency. He cleared the chamber in 4 minutes. What followed was not a confrontation. Confrontations are loud. They rely on force, on volume, on the blunt pressure of rank crushing opposition into submission. What Cesare di Ravello delivered was something Arabella would have recognized immediately, because she had built it. It was an argument, precise, sequential, documented at every turn. He opened with the timeline. The Paduan bond collapse, dated, sourced, cross-referenced against the consortium's own archived lending records. The collapse had occurred in February. Arabella had been engaged by the Fortini family in June. The chronology did not merely contradict the Whisper campaign. It dismantled it, date by date, with the methodical patience of someone who had spent 3 evenings learning exactly how she thought. He did not say Lady Arabella di Monteluce is innocent. He said, "Here is the documentation. Here are the dates. Here is the methodology by which any competent analyst would reach the same conclusion. I invite the consortium to explain, in writing, how they arrived at a different one." Director Morosini read for 11 minutes without speaking. Then he looked up and said carefully, "Where did you obtain this analysis framework, Your Grace?" Cesare closed his document case. "From the finest financial mind currently operating in the Veneto," he said. "I would suggest the consortium familiarize itself with her work before it makes any further decisions about her credentials. Under the institutional structures governing the Venetian banking consortium in 1858, a formal complaint lodged by a member of the ducal nobility carried the legal weight of a court petition. By entering the chamber as a private citizen armed with documentation rather than invoking his title, Cesare di Ravello made a deliberate choice. He forced the consortium to engage with the evidence itself, not merely defer to his rank. It was, whether he recognized it as such or not, precisely the argument Arabella would have made. He had learned well. He was back on the Dorsoduro waterfront by 10:30. He did not go to her study. He went home. He sat in the tall-backed chair by the window of his palazzo, watched the November light move across the Grand Canal, and waited for what he knew was coming. He did not have to wait long. She arrived at the Palazzo di Ravello at noon. She had not sent a card. She had not requested an appointment. She had walked through the water gate, past the startled housekeeper, up the marble staircase, and into the main receiving room with the focused, unhurried momentum of a woman who has made a decision and is not interested in being redirected. Cesare was standing at the window when she entered. He turned. He did not look surprised. "You went to Morosini," Arabella said. "I did. Without telling me." "Yes." She set her gloves down on the side table, a careful, deliberate motion that told him she intended to stay long enough to finish this properly. "I had it handled," she said. "You had a hearing scheduled in 3 weeks," Cesare replied with equal quiet. "Your 2 remaining clients received follow-up letters this morning from parties unknown, suggesting they await the consortium's findings before proceeding. You would have lost them before your hearing date." Arabella was silent for a moment. She had not known about the follow-up letters. She absorbed this without visible reaction. The particular discipline of a woman who has learned that showing the precise moment something lands is a vulnerability she cannot afford. "You used my methodology," she said. "I used your methodology. You studied it. For 3 evenings. A pause. You think in sequences. Every conclusion is bracketed by its own evidence on both sides. It is," he stopped, considered, "the most structurally honest way of reasoning I have encountered." Something moved through Arabella's expression, too quickly for either of them to name it comfortably. That is not the point, she said. What is the point? The point, she said, her voice carrying the careful steadiness of someone navigating close to an edge, is that I have spent 5 years in this city proving that I do not require rescue, that my work stands without a patron's hand underneath it. And you have walked into the most powerful banking chamber in Venice and placed your name, your title, beside my documentation, and now every man in that room will spend the rest of his career wondering which one of us actually did the thinking. Cesare looked at her for a long, unguarded moment. Then let me be clear about something, he said. He crossed the room, not quickly, not with any of the dramatic urgency the moment might have invited, and stopped at a distance that was close enough to be deliberate and far enough to be chosen. I told Morosini, specifically, that the methodology belonged to you. I told him your name. I told him your address. I told him that if the consortium wished to understand how the analysis was constructed, they would need to engage you directly, because I could present it, but I could not have built it. Arabella held his gaze. Why? She asked, and her voice, for the first time in all their weeks of careful professional arrangement, carried something unguarded in it, something that had been waiting, with great discipline, for permission to exist. Cesare was quiet for long enough that the canal sounds outside filled the room. Water against stone, the distant call of a gondolier, the ordinary music of Venice continuing without interest in the extraordinary thing happening in this room. Because it was true, he said, and because you have spent long enough in rooms where the truth about you was not spoken. She did not look away. He did not move closer. But the careful, constructed distance between them, built over weeks of ledgers, and professional propriety and pride on both sides, shifted in that moment quietly and irrevocably into something else entirely, something neither of them named. Not yet. On the 4th day, a document arrived at Arabella's Dorsoduro study, hand-delivered, no footman's livery, no ducal seal pressed into the wax. Just her name, in a handwriting she had come to recognize across 3 months of estate corrections and margin notes and Thursday afternoon sessions that had lasted considerably longer than either of them had originally scheduled. She opened it at her desk, in the flat, honest light of the Dorsoduro morning. It was a business proposal, not a marriage settlement, not a letter of courtship dressed in commercial language. A genuine, structurally sound, legally considered proposal for a joint financial consultancy. The Di Ravello Capital Holdings and Estate Network, paired with Arabella's analytical methodology and existing client relationships, operating as a formal partnership under both their names. She read it twice. Then she read clause for a 3rd time. All decisions regarding the consultancy's direction, client engagements, and financial strategy to be made in mutual agreement. Neither partner holds authority over the other's professional judgment. Neither partner may act unilaterally on matters affecting the partnership without documented consent from both. At the bottom, in that same handwriting, this is not a negotiation. It is an invitation. Revise any clause that does not satisfy you. I have left the final page blank for that purpose. Signed C. Arabella sat for a long time in her study. Outside, the narrow canal did what it always did. Carried its gondoliers and its arguments and its ordinary Venetian morning without pausing for the weight of decisions being made in the rooms above it. She picked up her pen. She revised Clause 7. She added a Clause 9. And then, for the first time in 5 years of operating alone in a city that had never quite made room for her, she signed her name beside someone else's, and felt not the diminishment she had always feared, but the particular, unfamiliar steadiness of being met. She sent it back the same afternoon. He signed it before evening. They did not speak of what had happened in the receiving room. Not directly. Not with the words that had been hovering, unspoken, in the space between them for weeks. Some things are said more honestly in clauses than in confessions. Some devotion is proven not in a single grand gesture, but in 3 evenings spent learning how someone thinks. In a banking chamber entered without a crest. In a document that arrives with a blank page and the instruction to make it yours. This is what the great civil codes of 1858 could not legislate, could not entail away, could not route through fathers or husbands or the careful machinery of inheritance law. The choice made freely to place your name beside another person's, not out of necessity, not out of rescue, but because they earned it. Honor is not the grand sacrifice witnessed by crowds. It is the quiet one no one sees, made in reading rooms, in document cases carried without crests, in blank pages left deliberately for someone else to fill. And Arabella di Monteluce, the most dangerous lady in Venice, had spent 5 years waiting, without knowing she was waiting, for a man who understood that. Some battles are not won by force. They are won by the patient, relentless willingness to be worthy. Before you go, here is why this story exists. In 1858, women like Arabella were real, brilliant, capable, and constantly fighting a system designed to keep them invisible. Northern Italy was under Habsburg rule, and while the civil codes allowed women to own property on paper, high society banking consortiums and political salons routinely refused to recognize a woman's legal contracts or authority without a man standing behind her. We created this story because those women deserve to be seen, not as victims of their era, but as the most dangerous thing any unjust system ever produces. A person who refuses to disappear. Thank you for watching.